We're about to learn about an amazing skill called summarization. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to somebody. This is my best friend, Manuel. And I've written a beautiful description about some of the qualities that he has, but Manuel seems to think it's a little long. So let's see what you think. Here's my description. That's not all of it. It goes on and on and on. Manuel is a little bit shy about all this information that I have about him, so what he decided to do was make a little bitty one. So he took everything that I wrote and he made this teeny, teeny, tiny description of him. Today, we're going to learn how to do this. The first thing is you have to look at your passage and break it up into sections. Now this passage is pretty easy because it's already separated into paragraphs, and each paragraph is about something different. Then we're going to look at each paragraph and decide what the main idea is. The first paragraph is mostly about how tall he is. The second paragraph, it looks like it talks about basketball, but really it says he's actually better at playing musical instruments, and he wants to be a band director of a high school or a college band. So this paragraph is mostly about how much he loves music. Now the third paragraph talks about how funny he is. Now, when you're going to make that little bitty summary that we talked about earlier, you have to make sure that it still talks about the information that's in the passage, but you're not including all the information, just the most important facts. The one that he came up with says, "My best friend Manuel is very tall. He loves music and is also very funny." This statement tells us that he's very tall from the first section, he loves music from the second section, and he's also very funny from the third section. Now I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this is easy to do on a little passage about Manuel, but what about those long passages with information and facts? What do you do then? Well, the answer is a graphic organizer. This is what's going to help you for informational text, and I'm going to show you how. So here's our passage. It's called Changing Leaves, and it's all about how leaves change color in the fall. Now this is a pretty long passage, so we're going to use a graphic organizer to help us. Now one thing you might notice is that the passage actually has 4 paragraphs, but the graphic organizer has only 3 boxes for details. You don't always have to have 3 details. You can maybe have 2, you can have 4 or 5. It depends on the passage. We're going to take a look at that first paragraph and see that it actually has some questions for the reader. It doesn't really provide a lot of information. So we're going to kind of skip the first paragraph to write the summary. Now let's take a closer look. Remember that we're starting with this second paragraph. For most of the year, the leaves of many trees are a beautiful green color. This is the result of a chemical inside of them called chlorophyll. Plants use chlorophyll to absorb energy from the sun. During the spring and summer, there is so much chlorophyll in the leaves that they appear a bright green. Now most of this paragraph talks about what? This thing called chlorophyll. Plants have a lot of it in the spring and summer, and that's why they're so green. Now what I have done here is underline some of the most important information, and I'm going to take that stuff that I underlined and make a sentence out of it for detail number 1. Here's my sentence. During most of the year, leaves are green because they contain a lot of chlorophyll. This gives me just the most important information from that section. We're going to do the same thing for the second section and for the third section. The second section is a little bit longer than the first one. It has a lot of information. Here's the most important information. And here's my sentence. So you'll notice I changed a little bit of the words, but most of it is exactly how it's stated in the passage. I just don't have all the information. Now we're going to go on to the third section. This section just talks about some trees that have leaves that do not change colors. So this is pretty easy to find the main idea. Now we have 3 main ideas of the paragraphs. These are the details that are going to make up the summary. So you're going to take the first sentence, you're going to add the second sentence, and you're going to add the third sentence. And a summary can have 3 or 4, maybe 5 sentences. It just depends on the passage. In this case, here's the summary I came up with. Now, a lot of times when you have questions, they give you a summary and they want you to determine if it is the best summary or not. When you're asked to do that, you basically do the opposite of what we just did. Let me show you. You have your whole passage here and you have a summary, an example. So you take that answer choice and you read the first little section. Where in the passage did that come from? That's right, it came from this section. Then we go on to the next part. Where did that come from? That's right, it came from the middle part and the last part. That sentence came from the bottom part. So we know that this summary contains the most important information from each section of our passage. And that's how you do summarization.